It started like any other ordinary flight. Passengers boarding, placing their luggage in overhead compartments, quietly claiming their assigned seats. But no one on that plane could have imagined the storm that was about to unfold just a few minutes before takeoff, one that would leave everyone on board stunned, especially one woman who thought she could get away with blatant racism. Before we dive in, if you've ever felt like life is holding you back from the success and abundance you know you deserve, then listen up. There's a powerful method called the 369 Manifestation Code, a simple 3-digit formula that can help you unlock outrageous wealth and abundance in the next 24 hours. It's transforming lives by realigning the way you think and attract what you want. If you're curious, check the first pinned comment below. This could be the breakthrough you've been waiting for. Now, back to the plane. The flight was scheduled to depart from Atlanta to New York. Business professionals, tourists, families, people from all walks of life were settling into their seats. Among them was a sharply dressed black man in his early 30s. Clean-cut, confident, calm. He wore a gray suit and a sky-blue tie, held a sleek leather briefcase, and quietly took his window seat in row 12 without saying much to anyone. He was the kind of man who carried himself with dignity. The kind of man who clearly had worked hard for everything he had. But across the aisle stood trouble. A white woman, mid-50s, blonde hair perfectly styled, power-walking down the aisle with a tight jaw and fire in her eyes. She stopped abruptly in front of row 12 and looked directly at the man already seated. Her lips curled. "Excuse me," she snapped. "You're in my seat." The man looked up, calmly, and with a polite smile said, "I believe this is 12A, correct?" "Yes, 12A," she snapped again. "That's my seat." He pulled out his boarding pass and handed it to her with patience. She looked at it, and the color slightly drained from her face. He was, in fact, sitting exactly where he was supposed to be. "Well, that can't be," she mumbled, still staring at the pass. "There must be a mistake." Other passengers began to turn their heads, sensing tension. The woman didn't back down. "Listen, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is a mix-up. You need to get up and find your real seat. Maybe in the back." The man tilted his head slightly. "I assure you, ma'am. This is my assigned seat." The tone was respectful, but firm. He wasn't moving. The woman's voice rose. "Unbelievable. You people think you can just take what you want, don't you?" A hush fell over the nearby rows. The man glanced at the flight attendant walking toward them, her face already tight with tension. The woman turned toward the attendant, arms crossed. "This man is in my seat," she barked. "You need to move him, now." The flight attendant, visibly uncomfortable, took both of their boarding passes and looked between them. After a few moments, she handed them back. "Ma'am, this gentleman is in the correct seat. You're actually in row 14. "What? That's impossible," the woman stammered. "I always sit in 12A on this flight. I'm a platinum member." The attendant, trying to de-escalate, replied, "I understand, but today your assigned seat is in row 14. People were now openly watching. Some with disgust, others with disbelief. But the woman wasn't finished. She leaned closer to the man, her voice lower but even more venomous. "You don't belong up here," she hissed. "Go back to where you came from." The man remained still. Calm. As if he had heard this all before. And then, something shifted. He slowly reached into his jacket pocket. Not aggressively. Not in a rush. Just deliberately. People held their breath. He pulled out a small black leather badge wallet, opened it, and held it up for her to see. It was an FBI badge. The woman's eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He leaned just a bit forward and said quietly, "I belong exactly where I am." The flight attendant blinked. The passengers stared. And the woman? She backed up slowly, like a balloon losing air. Her authority, her arrogance, gone in an instant. And just like that, the dynamic shifted completely. She didn't say another word. Not to the man. Not to the flight attendant. She turned away, face flushed, and walked stiffly to row 14. You could hear the collective exhale from the nearby rows. Some even smiled. But the story doesn't end there. For the next few moments, the cabin remained silent, almost unnaturally so. You could feel the weight of what had just happened settle in the air like a fog. People weren't just reacting to a seat dispute, they had just witnessed a moment of poetic justice. The man, calm as ever, returned the badge to his pocket without a single extra word. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He simply sat back, folded his hands, and looked out the window as if nothing had happened. But that silence? It was loud. Loud in the way that shame echoes. Row 12 had just become the center of a lesson everyone on board would never forget. One of the nearby passengers leaned over the aisle and whispered, "Sir, I just want to say, thank you. For handling that the way you did." He nodded politely, offering only a quiet, "Appreciate it." The flight attendant, still visibly shaken by what she had witnessed, returned a few minutes later with a complimentary drink and said, "On behalf of the crew, thank you for your patience." The man simply smiled. "No problem. I've dealt with worse." And that's when the curtain behind the badge began to pull back, just a little. The woman in row 14? She didn't say a single word for the entire flight. No eye contact. No comments. No complaints. She kept her eyes glued to the seat in front of her, clearly realizing just how badly she had embarrassed herself, and how lucky she was that it didn't escalate further. As the flight neared its destination, the man opened his laptop and began typing. He wasn't playing a game or watching a movie. He was working, focused, intentional. A few passengers noticed. One leaned over quietly and asked, "Are you really with the FBI?" He looked up, gave a small nod, and then said something that would stick with them long after the plane landed. There's a time to speak, and a time to listen. But there's always time to carry yourself with dignity. And just like that, the mystery of who he was, and how he kept such composure, only deepened. When the plane finally landed and passengers began to disembark, the mood was different. Lighter, more thoughtful. A few people even clapped quietly as the man stood and grabbed his briefcase. The woman? She waited until nearly everyone had left before she stood. Face still red, shoulders slouched, eyes on the floor. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Outside the terminal, as people waited for their rides and gathered their belongings, one of the younger passengers caught up to the man and asked, "How did you stay so calm through all that?" He paused, looked the young man in the eyes, and said something simple, but powerful. "When you know who you are, no one can tell you where you don't belong." And that's the truth at the heart of this story. In a world where appearances are judged before words are spoken, where prejudice still tries to shout louder than truth, there's nothing more powerful than someone who stands their ground without raising their voice. There was no yelling, no threats, no anger. Just presence. Just truth. Just quiet, undeniable strength. And that's what silenced the hate louder than any argument ever could. Because here's the thing. Anyone can react. But true power? True confidence? It shows in how you respond. And that's the message we're left with: you don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are. If this story made you feel something, if it reminded you of the power of staying calm in the face of injustice, then don't just click away. Take a moment now to subscribe to the channel. We share true stories that inspire, challenge, and reveal the deeper truths hidden in everyday moments. If you believe more people need to hear stories like this, hit the like button, it helps us reach more viewers. And share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen something like this happen? What would you have done? And hey, don't forget, if you're ready to change your mindset and unlock real abundance in your life, check out the 369 manifestation code in the first pinned comment. That simple 3-digit formula is already transforming lives. Yours could be next. Thanks for watching, and remember, power isn't always loud. Sometimes, it wears a quiet suit and a badge.